All right, perfect. Thank you, everybody, and hello, everyone. Today, I have a very short talk on the recruiting tokens issued by the East India Company during the 1800s, 19th century. So I'll jump right into it. So this is a prominent British gentleman who was born in 1725. He arrived in India as a clerk in the East India Company, and he was making a measly £5 a year, which even by today's standards is a very, very, very small amount. But when he left India in 1760 and went back to England, he left with 300,000 British pounds. That's equivalent to close to $50 million, 46 million plus. Plus, he had other sources of income from his assets in India. Open question to all. Who is this? Who is this person?
Is it Clive?
It is indeed Robert Clive, Major General Robert Clive. Was that you, Paul?
It was me, Alex.
Oh, Alex. Okay. Good. Really good, Alex.
I could have told you it was Clive.
All right. So it is indeed Major General Robert Clive who really rose to prominence. He made his fortune in India. He won the Battle of Plassey for the East India Company in 1757, which sort of gave the British their stronghold and established them as the supreme European power in India. So there's an opportunity to make a lot of money in India. Especially by the EIC officers. In fact, Clive himself said that I stand astonished at my own moderation when asked about all the money that he had acquired. He said, it's a wonder that I wasn't more corrupt than this. And of course, he died in 1774. He slit his own throat. So all stories have a happy ending. By the way, just a disclaimer, Clive is seen as the villain in Indian history textbooks, but I'm sure the perception is very different in Britain and India, in the West. So officers could make a lot of money in the East India Company in India. So a lot of gentlemen, quote unquote gentlemen, people of wealth and prestige, young men of nobility, for example, they were keen to serve as officers, but there was no interest in serving in the enlisted ranks. So nobody wanted to serve as sepoys or as soldiers or as non-commissioned officers. And there are several reasons for this. Number one is there was a very high mortality rate for soldiers when they were traveling from Britain to India. In fact, on a ship in 1760, the death rate was recorded as 70%. So 70% of all the recruits perished during the sea voyage. And it doesn't end there. Once you end up in India, you can always die from tropical disease. Another reason was that the EIC typically had a 10-year service term, and which could be extended by 5 years. So it was more of a gig as opposed to a lifetime career in the regular army. So a lot of people prefer to go into the regular army as opposed to the EIC. The East India Company also had a preference for Protestants, which means a lot of the Irish and Welsh populations were excluded from service. And of course, as a rank and file soldier, you are bound to be mistreated by your officer. So there's not a lot of interest in signing up for the East India Company. So how were these soldiers recruited by the East India Company? Number one, in the early 1700s, they used to use the agents or crimps. So you might have heard of the term Shanghaiing as a way to get sailors. It wasn't any better than that. So a lot of young men were kidnapped, locked away until they were shipped off to East India. A lot of times recruiting was done in jail. So they used to pick up imprisoned or condemned men to serve in the East India Company. So there was a really low quality troops who ended up in India. In fact, Lord Cornwallis in 1768 said that, I do not think Britain could have furnished such a set of wretched objects. But of course, these dubious means were not the only way soldiers were recruited. A lot of times the officers would go around recruiting people in their own sort of estates and towns through newspaper ads and other ways. And this was seen as a way for the officers to advance their own careers. Like, I've provided 100 men for the service, so they get a promotion. Eventually, in 1799, the authority to recruit for the EIC was given over to the British Army. And recruitment offices were set up in London, Liverpool, Dublin, Edinburgh, and a few years later in Cork, Bristol, and Newry. So, interesting note, all these are port towns, because that's obviously the best place to ship people off right away. Now, to generate more interest, the EIC issued a few tokens, and this is a short talk because only 3 tokens are known. 2 of them were issued out of London, and one of the tokens was issued out of Liverpool. There were no tokens were issued from any of the other recruitment offices. For example, Dublin, Edinburgh, Cork, Bristol, and Newry. No tokens are known from these locations, and most likely they don't exist. So let's look at each of these tokens in a little bit more detail. The first one I'm going to talk about is one of the London tokens, which is of the horse rider type. So it's a small sort of half penny weight token, about a little less than 3 grams, little under an inch. This one's made of copper. There is no date on it. This token has been described way back by Batty in 1877, and Pridmore also has an illustration in his catalog. And these tokens, they are probably minted at Soho, Birmingham. So because Matthew Bolton was commissioned with striking a lot of East India Company coppers and other coinage series at his Soho mint. So it's probably the same place where this token and the other tokens were struck. This one is not too uncommon. You do find them occasionally pop up on eBay or even on auction sites. They're not super expensive. You can probably get one for as low as $20 or as high as a few hundred, depending on where you're buying it and what's the condition. So that's the first token. The next token is again a London token with featuring a lion, and this lion features prominently on a lot of British India coins, especially coins for the Madras Presidency. So obvious, you can imagine that maybe it was the same engraver who engraved these tokens. This is a little bigger, almost an inch, a little under 5 grams. Again, there's no date on them. It's made of copper. And these are fairly rare tokens. I've only found 3 examples listed on acsearch.com, and I've never seen, in the last 10 years or so, I've never seen one listed on eBay. I might have missed a listing, but it really doesn't pop up. So the one on top is my example, which is a little bit battered, and this is a pristine example that sold a few years ago at Spink. So, and then the next token is, and the third token is very similar to the London token, but this was stuck at Liverpool. So in all respects, it's the same as the London token. It bears a rider on a horse with the legend horse artillery. On the other side, very similar legend, wanted for the East Indies. I'm sorry, I got the legend wrong at the bottom. But now it says apply at the London Road at Liverpool. And interestingly, this one is made of brass. In comparison, the London tokens were made out of copper. And again, this is a rare, I would say it's a rare token. I haven't found any of these tokens listed on AC Search in the last many years. So nothing has showed up through Spink or Baldwin's or Stephen Album or any of the other houses. I've seen 3 examples pop up on eBay in the last 6 years. So I managed to get 2 of them, but I missed one. And the other thing I wanted to note is that I looked at the design on the obverse with the horse artillery, and I tried to compare it with the London tokens. And to be honest, I couldn't find any differences in the dies. So I would imagine, I would think that they were stuck from the same dies with just a different reverse dies, because not a lot of these were stuck. So maybe they just needed one set of die, obverse die for striking all of these tokens in one go. And then finally, how do we date these tokens? So Pridmore or Batty, they don't really list a date, but the indication is that it's somewhere between the Recruiting Act in 1799 all the way up to 1860, 1861 when the recruiting office was closed down. The clue really lies in this address that's listed. So it says apply at number 35 Soho Square, London. And if we look at the location of the EIC, the East India Company Recruiting Depot, from 1817 to 1833, the recruiting office was located at number 35 Soho Square. In 1834, it moved to, I'm sorry, this is number 28 Soho Square. It moved to number 28 Soho Square. And then after the Indian War of Independence or the Indian Rebellion, Indian Sepoy Mutiny in 1858, the recruiting depot was renamed as Recruiting Depot of the HM Indian Military Forces, as the EIC was sort of transfer of power was moved away from the EIC to the Crown. And then 1861, the recruiting depot was finally closed down. So based on the address that's given, we can say that the tokens are dated somewhere between 1817 and 1833. So I don't know, or we don't know the exact date of issue, but I'm sure if we get our hands on the Soho records or any other records, you might be able to pin it down to a particular year. And I'm guessing that all of these were issued in one go. Maybe in at least the horse artillery ones were issued in one go. Given that these are not super abundant. So with that, I'll end my talk, and thank you everyone for your patience. Happy to take any questions.
Well, there are some questions in the chat, Avik. Would you like me to read them, or do you want to read them yourself?
Okay, yeah, I'll look it up. Okay, so the first question from you, Peter, was rank bought or by merit in the EIC? In the army, it was usually bought at the time. So very interesting. There are a few articles out there that talk about promotions and progression in the EIC. So the EIC was, I would say, more equitable. Your background was less important in the EIC compared to the regular army, especially for officers. So, I mean, an excellent example is, of course, Robert Clive, who rose up the ranks starting from a lowly clerk, and he did not come from a lot of money. He was the oldest of 13 children, so it was not as if he was born with a silver spoon in his mouth. For the enlisted men, you could make money, but I'm not really sure if there was a lot of mobility between from the enlisted ranks to the officers, right? So, yeah, so Dublin and Cork would not have yielded many Protestant recruits. Why bother? That's indeed true. And maybe that's why, a lot of the issues with recruitment, especially of Catholics, or lack of or lower preference for Catholics was earlier during the periods of the 1700s and so on. But the EIC always had a shortage of men. Always. They always competed with the regular army, even when this recruiting office was set up, taken over by the army. The understanding was that officers would be equally, or sorry, not officers, but soldiers would be equitably distributed between EIC and the regular army, but the preference was always towards the regular army. I mean, the EIC always had shortages of about 70% or so, up to, or as high as 60-70% in the enlisted ranks. So at that point, I think they just opened up the ranks. And looking at the diaspora in India, there are a lot of Protestant sort of expats. So I bet at that point there were takers from Dublin and Cork. So question from Shashwat: how were these tokens used? Given to folks, why not use a flyer instead? Yeah, so I think they would be used exactly the way tokens are used now. They're promotional material, and there were, of course, newspaper ads. I'm sure flyers are put up as well. Tokens are just another media to advertise that. And given that there aren't thousands of these tokens floating around, I bet these were probably given out to at special events, maybe at recruit career fairs or recruiting fairs. I'm just guessing. like I said, the London horse artillery, this is the most common one. These ones, you rarely see them. So there's not a lot of them. Comment from Alex. Regarding Protestants in Dublin and Cork, you'd be surprised. There were a lot more Protestants. Actually, Alex, do you want to talk through this?
It was just in response to what Peter said. We think of modern Ireland as being a Catholic country, or perhaps today a post-Catholic country. But before independence, there were a lot more Protestants, including working class Protestants, who would have been the target of these recruitment campaigns, especially in Dublin.
Thank you, Alex. And then last comment from Joe. So at 21 mm, these are farthing size, not halfpenny. I stand corrected. Thank you, Joe. I always imagined that these were sort of analogous to the halfpenny tokens that were a lot more prevalent, and this was just meant to be emulating that. But I stand corrected. It probably doesn't match. Thank you. So